Remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. We're continuing the joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee. We are now in open session, and our next item is to review the school department's contract with D Bus Service and determine payment terms in response to school closure through June 2020. Go ahead, Ingrid.
So when school closed, we obviously did not need buses to transport our students anymore. The guidance that we received from the state was that it felt it would be the most efficient that districts that have the same vendor band together and work with that vendor to come to some agreement regarding payment. Until we knew for sure that we weren't going back to school, there was that possibility that, you know, we would need the buses to stand ready to go. So Westford is part of a group of 13 districts that have D-Bus as their regular transportation vendor. Just as a side, D also provides quite a bit of special education transportation for us as well. So we have been negotiating with D. I'm with two other people, part of the negotiating team representing all the districts. Our thought is that we should pay for some of the general overhead readiness. Town council and I have had numerous discussions about this, and that we need the buses when we come back. We absolutely do. But the group of the 13 districts feel that, you know, a fair percentage would be around the 45% range that would cover most of the vehicular costs, maintenance, not fuel, not labor. It is consistent what other districts are doing. There is a broad range around the state. Some of the districts that settled with their bus company before schools were ultimately closed settled at a higher rate. Initially, D did send us a letter asking for an 85% payment. But they have also shared that they have applied for an SBA loan for the Payroll Protection Act. So initially they did lay off their drivers and then hired them back in order to qualify for those loans.
Can I ask a quick question? Are we supposed to be seeing a slide? Right now we have a black screen.
No.
Okay.
Joining us this evening is Matthew Fair. Did I say that correct?
Yes.
The attorney that's been working with Ingrid on this negotiation. So Matthew, do you have anything to add to her comments, and then we can open it up to questions from the board?
Sure, and thank you. This is, you know, every one of these is a little different from the other server, so it's a little different from what I've used in other meetings, but I hope you can hear and see me just fine.
Yes.
So good evening, and through you to the board. Yeah, Ingrid and I have had a couple of conversations over the past couple of weeks. Actually, probably more than that. We took a look at the contract documentation that was issued at the time that the award was pursuant to which the award was issued, and quite frankly, your contract documentation includes language that is very favorable to the town, and that even in a force majeure event, which is what we're talking about with respect to circumstances that would excuse performance that are outside the control of either party to the contract are concerned, the town is under no payment obligation. And so when they submitted a bid in accordance with the IFB, they did so in reliance on that provision, which becomes part of the contract terms. So the contract language is very favorable. Having said that, and Ingrid and I talked about this on multiple occasions, and in light of the DESE guidance that was issued previously, responsive to the CARE Act condition relative to the conditions placed on receipt of FEMA assistance and other financial assistance, which quite frankly is the only state assistance we've received to date. I will mention to you that there is legislation pending on this point, but I will get to that in a second. It seems to me, in light of everything that has been transpiring and in light of the contract documents, that the town should consider, in my opinion, a contract amendment that would account for certain out-of-pocket actual costs relative to performance obligations under the contract. And I think Ingrid had mentioned this earlier, in that it would not include operator labor. It would be the out-of-pocket expenses incurred by the town relative to the buses and vans themselves, the financing of such, debt service, leases that cover the costs associated with that equipment, fuel storage contracts, lot rentals. If buses are stored at a lot, that's a cost that they're going to incur irrespective of the COVID pandemic. Maintenance costs. So I'm not saying that all labor costs should not be considered. I think certain maintenance costs surely should be considered. If a mechanic is on site to perform maintenance work, regular maintenance work on a bus or van or other equipment that will service the contract, then I think those individuals should be compensated under some alternative temporary arrangement. It may include some other registration or licensing fees. Those are the types of things, for example, that are, I think, fair candidates to consider as part of any contract amendment. I think that ensures continuity of contract, that ensures readiness of services under the agreement, and that is therefore consistent with the DESE guidance, irrespective of what the FEMA assistance contingency says. That was the only guidance, quite frankly, the state has rendered on this subject. There have been issues raised, and this gets to my point I raised earlier about legislative activity, whereby the accountants out there in all cities and towns, they've raised issues with respect to how do we perform our payment obligations for a contract that's not fully performed. And specifically, I'm referring to Section 56 of Chapter 41 of the General Laws. Having said that, it's my opinion, and irrespective of the legislation that's pending, which I'll get into in a second, that any temporary arrangement would satisfy those conditions. And the reason I say that specifically, and I know I've mentioned it to Ingrid over the phone, and Jody, I know I sent you an email again minutes before the meeting tonight, so you probably didn't have the benefit of looking at that. But bottom line is that the school contract itself is, if we ensure continuity of contract and we modify the contract thereunder, then we are fully performing. To the extent that D Bus agrees with us to perform under a modification, then that is full performance. So I don't see there to be an issue under 4156. I also don't think it's an issue under 4156 because you're ensuring readiness of contract. So when school is in session in September, hopefully, and in light of the governor's order that postponed school until that time at least, that would clearly, in my opinion, satisfy those conditions, and therefore I don't think there's a municipal finance issue. So to that end, that, and as I've alluded to several times now, there is legislation pending. It's Senate Bill 2680. It was engrossed by the Senate yesterday, and when I say that, it received initial passage. It still has to go to the House for engrossment and then enactment in both branches, and that assumes there's no amendments and that the two bodies agree to their amendments before it's even sent to the governor for signature. There is language that would support and unequivocally hold, in essence, that my opinion and basically support my opinion in that full performance under the contract is not requisite to arriving at a temporary solution thereunder. And specifically, it would also require that all vendors would, as it's written currently, and this could change tomorrow, quite frankly, it's unknown to me when the House will take it up. It could be as early as tomorrow, but quite frankly, I don't know. It was a Senate bill. It originated from the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate, so it's uncertain to me as far as whether or not it goes through all the processes. But that legislation does include a provision that would require that a vendor report to the awarding authority, so the town in this case, that, receipt of grants and other financial assistance as part of, justifying their ask, whatever the number is. I have also, in this case particularly, asked to review a non-disclosure agreement with the vendor to have them disclose certain financial information. Quite frankly, in my opinion, it makes some sense to afford any awarding authority the ability to, if they're going to agree to a business term, whether it's 45% or 85% or whatever the number is, that they produce certain financial information to support that. As I said before, for example, I don't think it's appropriate necessarily, and especially in light of the executive order issued by the governor, to necessarily agree to employment-related costs associated with drivers. But having said that, that's a business decision, and I leave that to you. But I will say that the legislation pending would at least require disclosure of certain receipt in kind from the federal or state governments. And maybe it goes further to require the reporting of certain other financial information like audited performers or, annual reports. But, and that was where we were heading with the NDA concept. They took issue, and Ingrid, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think they took issue particularly with a comment I made to that agreement that basically we can, I guess, theoretically dispense with it. I don't know why we would, because it provides a contract remedy. But the only thing we had added that I think they took issue to was language that would carve out from confidential information material that's subject to the public records law. So statute will trump contract. I just didn't want to lose the remedy afforded under contract. Having
Matthew,
said that,
can I jump in real quick? I want to get us to what decision we need to make tonight. It sounds like there will be some more information that we'll be interested in hearing, based on the Senate's actions. And but I'm wondering what we need to get to tonight. Yes, Ingrid?
So I would like to know if I have your support to continue to negotiate at a rate around 45%.
Okay. So I think there are a few questions from some board members.
Yep.
Mark, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. So Matthew, with all due respect, I didn't understand any of that because I am an accountant and a finance person. So here's how I think about it. At the end of the day, D-Bus Company right now is doing nothing on our behalf. They're not spending fuel. The drivers aren't. The drivers are not driving on our behalf. I am sure that there is very little maintenance that's going on. And on top of that, they've applied for PPP. So I don't know whether 45%, Ingrid, is the right number, whether 10% is the right number, or whether 90% is the right number. And I do know at the end of the day, it's the school committee's call, it's your budget. But I don't understand how a contract for which a private enterprise is potentially going to receive 2.5 months worth of salary and rent, for which we're getting no service on, why we have to subsidize that under some term that I'm not even sure is in the definition of in a dictionary of whether the town can, to do everything it can do. What's that, Ingrid? I can't remember the term. It's
Practicable.
yeah, practicable. That's a ridiculous term as well. So anyway, I can't offer an opinion because I don't know how all of that stacks up. If I'm D Bus Company and I'm getting 2.5 months worth of salary, and that's going to cover me keeping my employees, then what is it that I'm paying for as a town for this bus contract? I don't get it, because those salaries are going to maintenance primarily.
Mark, may I just say we've talked a lot about this over the last 6 weeks. We know that there is certainly debt service and debt retirement associated with the capitalization costs of purchasing the vehicles. There are a number of insurances that they're carrying. The cost actually of maintaining that fleet. We all know the concept of fixed and variable costs. What we're not paying is the variable cost. But what I think we are obligated to, and I think it's that 45% figure, pay for that part of the contract that says we have buses here and they're ready to go, and they're part of the total part of the contract. And yes, whether it's the private sector or the public sector, where they're producing 0 units or 1 million units, there are those fixed costs. And that's where I think that 45% is a very fair figure to pay them.
Yeah, I just don't
So
know.
we do have some data. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ingrid. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, we do have some data that some of the other districts had included in their bids to support that figure.
Yeah.
That's why, though, we did request audited financials. And that's what Matt was working on with the non-disclosure, because obviously as a private company, they didn't want those publicized, but that, we, the finance people and our superintendents would have access to audited financials in order to support any percentage.
So Elizabeth, sorry, one
Yes,
last follow-up
ahead.
question then. So Ingrid, is it your opinion that 45% is net of what they may receive as PPP?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Tom has a question. Go ahead, Tom.
I think you may have already answered it. So Ingrid, I think you're looking for an opinion from us because it's a school committee decision, but it sounds like you've looked at what their actual out-of-pocket costs are. We want them to still be in business to provide transportation in the fall. So if 45% is what you've carefully determined is what their actual out-of-pocket costs are to make sure they don't go under, then that makes a lot of sense to me to pursue.
That is based on the financials that we have been able to access. Any percentage we would want the most current audited financials to support.
And
that
to
would
Mark's
be
point,
part of the agreement.
And to Mark's point, you may be able to
Recommended.
negotiate in a clawback if they access additional money or there's some revision to their financials later.
I think it would be very prudent to put something like that in there.
And Matthew,
If I
that's
could
what you're saying.
Speak up.
coming.
Yeah, I think, in light of the legislation pending, obviously the idea is that we certainly should claw back to any legislative changes that we're aware of, that being one of them. And that language, like I discussed earlier, would allow the town, quite frankly, under the guise of statute, to obtain receipt of information pertaining specifically to receipt of any grant or other funding received by the federal or state government. So to the extent they have, then the way the legislation is currently drafted, they would have to disclose that anyway. It becomes a question of other information. So as I've indicated to Ingrid, I don't, this is a business decision on the part of the board and the committee. I'm just the attorney. there is no obligation, in my opinion, to compensate for the labor costs associated with driving, since we're not fully performing. But if there is an interest, which it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong, to ensure continuity of contract and readiness of services, which is consistent with everything that we've seen to date and the current legislation, then I think any temporary agreement that addresses costs that I described earlier are appropriate and is not violative of municipal finance law. And quite frankly, it's my opinion the legislation is not required. I don't, I know some accountants out there may disagree, but any amendment does not negate the obligation and the performance they're under pursuant to those provisions. But having said that, I think that, yeah, any agreement that we arrive at should certainly contemplate any legal change and keeping in mind what's pending currently in light of what was just said with respect to receipt of federal or state assistance.
Thank you. Andrea?
So piggybacking on what Tom said, it certainly sounds like over the last 6 weeks, Ingrid and Matt and Bill have taken a very long, hard, close look at this. From where I'm coming from is, I don't want to be faced in the fall with all of a sudden, we don't have bus service if we're, because we decide that we're not going to do anything here. So as long as there are clawback provisions in there, that we get the most updated financials from them before you commit to a particular percentage. And, you and Bill, and even with the assistance of Matt looking at them, that you're comfortable with those financials, then I'm certainly comfortable with, you and Bill making that decision in terms of what the percentage is. Like I say, I just think it's real important as we all have said tonight, is that the necessary protections be in place in any contract amendment that we do with the bus with D. And I also think I think Ingrid, you said they provide special need services as well. And if Courtney is trying and is going to be able to try and run double sessions, which I think you said earlier today, yes. We're going to need those buses.
Very true.
Scott?
And a great observation.
Scott, you had a comment?
So I don't know the bus business, but I do work with large numbers of equipment rental companies. And the nature of that business is highly capitalized with short-term, 4 and 5 year lifespans of their equipment. So I don't know if it's 45% or not, but this is not an average business. Their capital costs is a fairly high fraction of total. So I think, as with Tom and Andrea, I'd want to see some documentation on what that share should be. But we just saw Hertz go bankrupt because the cost of their cars could not be offset with labor alone. So and I think it's a case in point that we don't want them dumping their bus fleet and then we don't have it in the fall. So we need, I think, to kind of maintain, as you call it, continuity of service to make sure that's there when we want it.
Yeah, and if we were to have to go out to bid for school buses at some point in time in the summer, I can unequivocally tell you we are going to pay right through the roof for that bus service. So I'm not representing D Bus Company, but I've been familiar with that company for over 25 years. They have been nothing but fair and honest with the Westford Public Schools, and I do think it's worth something, particularly the 45%, to keep them as a contractor in this system.
And I do have to point out that I know personally from the last contract, the bidding process, and I believe the previous one, and I can't speak to the ones before that, D-Bus was the only bidder for our bus contract.
Right.
Gloria?
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'd like to thank Ingrid and Bill, and thank you, Matt, for being here tonight as well. It sounds like this negotiation has been conducted in a really responsible way, and we're very much doing our due diligence on behalf of the school system and on behalf of the town and the taxpayer. And, you know, we're negotiating as one of 13 districts who all use D-bus service. And if through your negotiations, you've come to the conclusion that something, you know, in the range of that 40%, 45% figure is the responsible choice to allow us to maintain our contract, to maintain our long-term, very long-term relationship with the bus company, maintain continuity of contract, as Matt has indicated, maintain service readiness, whether it be for special education transportation that might be needed over the summer, or certainly our regular yellow bus transportation, which, knock on wood, we will need first day in the fall. We need to make sure those buses are there. We need to make sure this service is available for our community. So I think doing our part to maintain this relationship is the responsible long-term choice.
Thank you, Gloria. So do we need to take a vote this evening? Do you, Jody, do you need a vote from the select board so you can sign the warrant if this gets, if there's an agreement and payment is made?
That would be helpful.
Okay. So do I have a motion? So just to be clear, the select board is voting on this because Jody signs those warrants as well. And so she wants to be certain that she has the support of the select board to sign this. And then I don't know if the school committee needs to take a vote or if you've already discussed this.
I'd like to have the school committee vote on it first, personally.
Okay,
We've already
that would be
discussed
fine.
this.
Did you take a vote, Avery, or are you going to?
We will be taking a vote. We have been closely monitoring Ingrid's progress.
So if we are taking a vote tonight, do you want to do
We're
that
not
first?
gonna approve.
Is the school committee ready to support?
No, it's fine, because we're not going to approve.
Sorry,
We're
Avery,
not
can
going
you
to
repeat
approve
that?
anything. I know my connection is going. We're not going to approve anything more than what Ingrid recommends, and definitely not in the 85% range.
So has the school committee taken a vote to support up to 45%?
This is Gloria again. It sounds like Avery's having some technical difficulty. My understanding is up until this point, we have taken a vote to support Ingrid's negotiations with D-Bus. And at this point, I'll defer back to Ingrid to see what additional vote or guidance you might need from us tonight.
I mean, obviously, before anything is agreed upon, I don't have that authority. That's your authority. I would just be the messenger bringing back to you what we agree upon, and then of course you would have to vote.
Right.
The school committee has given me, the authority to negotiate.
So
Elizabeth?
should we wait to take a vote then?
But I'm not sure what we're.
Mark?
Yeah, Elizabeth, I don't know why as a select board, we would vote on something that's not in our budget that the school committee has yet to vote on.
I can't speak to the part about the school committee not voting yet. We're discussing this, so Jody knows she has our support to sign that warrant when payment's made. But if the school committee has not agreed to something yet, then perhaps we should wait and come back at our next meeting or once the negotiation has concluded, Ingrid, and then take a vote.
Yeah, so I do appreciate everyone spending the time on this, because I really didn't want to go down a path that we were negotiating and not know that everyone had all this information moving forward. I think that would be disingenuous to the other districts and to D-Bus as well. Whereas we may not be ready for a formal vote on an exact percentage, I did feel it was very important that everyone gets on the same page. So I do appreciate that.
So is this conversation sufficient for you, Ingrid? and Bill.
Well, I'm not
to
hearing
continue.
anyone's telling me stand down and go
Yes.
home, so.
Yeah, no, it's really consistent with what we've been talking about in terms of the range of responsible compensation for certain fixed costs associated with the bus contract.
Okay. So I think we'll wait then for any vote until you come back and have something more concrete. Okay.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right. Any other
Thank you.
questions
Matt,
or
thank
comments?
you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Matt.
Thank you,
Be
Matt.
well. Take care. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So with that, with no vote on that, I think we have nothing else on our agenda this evening, unless there are any other final comments. All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Thank you. We'll do a roll call. Andrea,
Yes.
Scott,
Aye.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom?
Aye.
Yes. Go ahead, Avery.
School committee motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, Alicia,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Gloria,
Aye.
Megan. Aye. Sean,
Aye.
and it looks like Ming Chen is not on the call, so aye, so unanimous.
All right. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank
Good
you
night,
for the
thank you.
Good night, everyone.
conversation.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thanks all.